Today on the Inside Scoop, is Jim Harbaugh's suspension news the reason for Michigan's recent recruiting slide? Two major commitments taking place this weekend. So let's just get right into the show right now. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button because it is make or break weekend for Oklahoma on the defensive line. The Sooners currently have the 16th ranked recruiting class in America, but there is a commitment taking place this weekend that could completely change the trajectory of OU's 2024 class. Let's bring on our next guest, Josh McCuistion of Soonerscoop.com. Josh, you know why we are here on Saturday. One of the most important OU targets in the 24 class is going to make his announcement. Five-star David Stone, the number 2 ranked defensive lineman in the country. So right now, I just got to ask, how are OU fans feeling over on Sooner Scoop as we're just about 48 hours away from his decision?
I think David Stone could have told the world that it's going to be Oklahoma on Saturday, and OU fans would still be nervous. Like, there's just no way around that. But I do. I think there's a feeling that you kind of keep waiting for the groundswell from Miami to maybe, they start hearing some inside or there's something changing there. You haven't really heard that so far. With Williams-Nwaneri, it was a very different scenario where Missouri insiders felt like Missouri was in a good place, and so did plenty of other schools as well. So with Stone, it feels almost like you're trying to find who the stalking horse is going to be. And Miami makes sense because I know there is a large group in his family that would like to see him go to Miami. Yeah. But I think Oklahoma's done a good enough job here that I think they're going to close this race. But again, like OU fans, I'm not going to count on anything.
You touched on Williams-Nwaneri to Mizzou. How much did that recruitment impact the importance of David Stone's commitment on Saturday for Oklahoma fans?
Tremendously. There's just no question that this class was always going to be about what the defensive line could or couldn't be and who was going to be part of it. And there are still some key pieces out there for Oklahoma. But if you miss David Stone, it's really hard to imagine a way where this class gets anywhere near what OU fans had hoped it would be at one point in time. So I think this is the fundamental piece. This is the guy that a year ago everyone said, I don't know what else is going to happen in 2024, but this is the guy you have to get. And so I think that is why he has become such a big piece of the puzzle, because not only is he an in-state guy, but he's at a position where Oklahoma is desperately in need of difference makers. There's reason to think they've done what they need to do. It's just a matter of, kind of pushing it over the finish line. And when you have things like David Hicks and Williams-Nwaneri, where Oklahoma seemed to lead for months and then just kind of lost at the finish line, that's why this last 72 hours or so gets kind of sketchy for Oklahoma fans.
Yeah, it can. But right now, as it stands, it feels like Oklahoma is the favorite heading into this. They've seemed to be the consistent name throughout this entire cycle. I mean, Michigan State, they were an early favorite, but since then they've definitely fallen off. And I agree with you there. Miami is just one of these programs that you can't count out right now. But you have a pick in for David Stone to Oklahoma. So what's your confidence level as we're 2 days out?
Pretty high. I would say on our own scale, I would say I'm in the 70s. Like I think it's pretty unlikely that it's not Oklahoma, but and I think the thing to remember is if this is Oklahoma and Miami, Oklahoma's done well in that battle over the last year or so. Mm-hmm. You go back to Jaden Jackson earlier in this cycle, Devon Mitchell as well.
Yep.
And I think Devon Mitchell, there's some interesting parallels because it was kind of the same thing. Everybody thought it was Oklahoma. And then over the last week or two, you started hearing maybe Miami. And then at the end, Devon was like, no, it's Oklahoma. And what's even more interesting is that we know Devon Mitchell and David Stone communicate, and there is some there's something there to that. So like I said, it's not to be ruled out. We all have seen crazy recruiting finishes, but I think Oklahoma has a lot of reason to feel good.
All right. Now, David Stone, he announces on Saturday, but the hits keep coming. There's more big-time D linemen coming off the board. On September 1, five-star Dominick McKinley, the number 1 player in the state of Louisiana. He's got his finalists: LSU, Texas, Texas A&M, Ohio State, and Oklahoma. If Oklahoma lands David Stone, can they roll that momentum into turning 1 5-star D lineman into 2 5-star D linemen?
They're certainly going to try. I mean, there's no question that, again, and we've talked about this before, Josh, the opportunity to say, hey, you're not going to face all the doubles. Right. You're not going to do all that. There's two guys in this class that are going to be on the interior of that defensive line. At the same time, if I'm guessing right now, whether Stone does or doesn't commit to Oklahoma, I don't think it's going to have an impact here. It feels like maybe Oklahoma's faded a little bit for Dominick McKinley. I think they're still in the race, but it just doesn't feel like the momentum is there right now with Oklahoma. Now, something seismic like David Stone, maybe that turns things. Maybe that changes, the story around a little bit like you're referencing. But it's pretty hard for me to envision because it's not like these two are particularly close. I think it's more of, it would just be Oklahoma saying instead of this could happen, you could be a part of this. Now it's, well, we've got David Stone and now you can be a part of this. It's more active. But I don't know that it changes what they've been pitching.
All right. And then September 1st, we're still not done yet. After that, we roll to September 8th, where four-star defensive lineman Nigel Smith out of Melissa, Texas. Now, he's not a top 5 defensive lineman like the others. He's the 15th ranked player at his position. Still elite, 6'4", 265 pounds. How is Oklahoma looking for that one?
As Oklahoma rebuilds its defensive line, Nigel Smith is a guy a couple of years ago Oklahoma fans would have been doing backflips to even be involved with, much less, be in the position they're in. So that's what this class has a chance to be. And I think with Nigel Smith, maybe more than any defensive lineman, I feel like they're in good shape. Like I feel like they are right where they want to be. Texas A&M has made it interesting down the stretch, and I've talked to enough people there that say they're still doing all that they can. And again, there is absolutely the ghosts of the past that strike Oklahoma fans. But I do think Oklahoma is where they want to be. I think barring some big change, which knowing Nigel and covering him for the last couple of years, that's not really the kind of kid he is. I think he kind of knows what he wants to do. And for me, I feel like he's pretty much done. Like, I think he knows what he's going to do. I think it's going to be Oklahoma. He's going to announce it his first home game of the season there at Melissa and their new stadium that's just unbelievable. But again, I think Texas A&M is the one school that you could say is kind of in striking distance, but that's really the only one I see as a real threat to Oklahoma right now.
All right. Well, since I got you here, let's switch over to the offensive side of the ball real quick. Grant Brix, the number 2 ranked interior offensive lineman in the country. We don't exactly know when he's going to make his decision, but it feels like it could be here soon. What are you hearing where Oklahoma stands in that one?
Well, and the interesting part about Brix is it's not just when he's going to, make his commitment. It's if he even announces it. He is such a quiet kid. I've talked to a couple of staffs that feel like he could just call and tell the 3 schools involved in Nebraska, Kansas State, and Oklahoma, and then do nothing. He may not have a social media thing. He may not do anything. That's just kind of how Grant has handled this. He's been a very unique recruitment to follow. But I think this is going to come down to Nebraska and Oklahoma. Kansas State's involved, but it just kind of feels like there's 2 options here for him. And it feels like Nebraska has the proximity, and I know that's very important to him. He's talked to multiple schools about that. And then with Oklahoma, it's the track record of Bill Biedenbaugh. It's the strength and conditioning coach and Jerry Schmidt, who's, worked with guys like Lane Johnson and Trent Williams, all these great linemen through the years at Oklahoma. So I think there's a lot of belief in what those 2 can bring to him. And so it's kind of I guess for lack of a better way to put it, kind of the traditional head versus heart. Like head, he knows Oklahoma has this track record with offensive linemen and they're going to do all these things. And at the same time, Nebraska's very close to home. He can be close to his family, and I know that's important to him. So it's just kind of weighing out what's going to win there. I get the impression Oklahoma feels pretty good about it. But again, with a kid this quiet and this difficult to read, you never know. I mean, he could throw a curveball and it's Kansas State, and everybody ends up surprised. But my impression, talking to the 3 schools, or the reporters around them and those kind of things, that most think this is going to come down to Nebraska and Oklahoma.
All right. Well, Oklahoma rebuilding the trenches. Josh McCuistion from Soonerscoop.com. Thank you for dropping by the Inside Scoop.
Enjoyed it, Josh.
Miami's recruiting class is currently ranked 19th overall, but could they be closing in a top 10 ranked class by the end of this weekend? 2 of Miami's top targets at positions of need are both making their announcement on Saturday. The number 2 defensive lineman in America, 5-star David Stone, and the number 3 ranked safety in America, 4-star Zaquan Patterson, will be both announcing on Saturday. Now, Miami's recruiting has been a little stagnant this summer. There's been some big gets like a Marquise Lightfoot, but also a lot of misses. Let's bring on Stephen Wagner of Kane Sport. Stephen, let's start with David Stone, the 5-star defensive lineman at IMG Academy. He's narrowed his list to a final 3: Oklahoma, Michigan State, and Miami. What has Miami done to be among one of his 3 finalists?
Yeah, well, first off, Miami's throwing the kitchen sink at David Stone. They are going to leave it all on the table for this prospect, whose value, frankly, has only increased as Miami has been left out on so many different defensive linemen's recruitments and commitments. You look at Kamarion Franklin last week, who committed to Ole Miss. You look at Justin Scott, who committed to Ohio State earlier in the summer. That's only driven David Stone's value up as Miami searches for those really elite defensive linemen. Now, last year was kind of the year of the offensive line for Miami. This year was kind of supposed to be the year of the defensive line, where Miami really had its sights set on a lot of really elite, top-tier, blue-chip defensive linemen and edges, and they got a lot of these guys down to campus repeatedly during the spring for the spring game, and then over the summer for official visits. But things just haven't quite panned out yet, which, as I said a second ago, has made David Stone that much more valuable to the Canes. So Miami is going to leave it all on the kitchen table. They are going to throw everything they can at David Stone. Right now with Saturday coming up, David Stone is an absolutely massive priority for Miami.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the supply keeps dwindling of quality defensive linemen, but demand keeps going up. So that's only going to drive up the value, the importance of a David Stone to Miami right now. So I would kind of consider Miami the dark horse in all of this, right? Like Michigan State was maybe the favorite early on. Oklahoma been the consistent team. And then you got Miami, who has missed on a couple guys, and they do need defensive line help desperately. This was a big year for that. So what do you make of Miami's chances as we're just about 48 hours out? Let me set the scene. Summer's coming to an end. You've spent the last 2 or 3 months just laid up on the beach enjoying the sun. But now football season is right around the corner, and you can't find tickets anywhere. It sounds like a nightmare, but don't let this be the way that your season starts. That's why I'm here to tell you about Game Time. It's the fast and easy way to buy tickets online for all the big-time matchups. Game Time will get you to this year's biggest college football games with elite deals on last-minute tickets and the best price guarantee. Don't stress over getting into your favorite team's season opener or the biggest rivalry game of the year. There's only so many big games, and you need to get these tickets at the best prices. Game Time is the place for last-minute ticket deals. Forget planning months in advance. That's out. Game Time has deals and tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets on all the sports and entertainment events. You can even use this on concerts. Use Game Time to get $20 off your first concert. Game Time is the place for last-minute ticket deals. So here's what we're going to do. Snag the tickets without stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code INSIDESCOOP for $20 off your first purchase. Create an account, use promo code INSIDESCOOP for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Terms apply. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
I think Miami has definitely done a good job to close the gap, maybe from what it was. A few weeks ago, someone actually asked me this on a message board. A few weeks ago, I probably would have said, it's probably 80% Oklahoma or maybe 75% Oklahoma and maybe somewhere in the range of 15 to 20% Miami. But I think that gap has closed a little bit over these last couple weeks. If I was a betting man, I would probably put some money on the Sooners over Miami. But that being said, I think the Canes have done a really good job to close that gap here. I'd say maybe if I had to put a number on it, I'd say my confidence that Miami gets him is maybe somewhere around 35 or 40%. Definitely not enough to list Miami as the favorite by any means, but definitely not enough to count Miami out either. It really wouldn't shock me if he committed to the Canes, although I'm definitely not expecting it by any means. But this is also a guy who Miami is going to recruit very, very aggressively all the way to the end. I expect him to be heavily recruited until signing day, until that moment that pen hits paper. Regardless of what happens, I don't expect Mario Cristobal and the staff to be letting up anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Oklahoma probably the favorite here heading into this one as we're 2 days out, but I do give Miami a shot here. So we'll see if they can close. All right, there's another big recruitment that's going to go down on Saturday. The announcement of 4-star safety Zaquan Patterson out of Chaminade Madonna High School, the number 3 ranked safety in America. Now, Miami's the leader right now on the recruiting prediction machine, but FSU, Michigan, Auburn, they are also involved, and they've also been pushing hard. So, first of all, what has Miami done to put themselves in Patterson's final group?
Miami's done a pretty decent job recruiting Zaquan Patterson. They've been consistent. He still hears from them pretty regularly. He took a couple of different visits to other schools over the summer, but I've heard that wasn't necessarily so much Zaquan saying that Miami had fallen off, because he visited FSU, Auburn, and Michigan. He visited them twice each unofficially over the summer. He has not taken any official visits yet, by the way, but he visited those 3 schools twice each over the summer. He only visited Miami once, and I've heard that wasn't necessarily because he's losing confidence in the Canes, or that he's loving the Canes less than he was, but more that he felt like he can get down to Miami anytime that he wants, as opposed to having to either make a really long drive to Tallahassee or having to get on a flight to go to places like Auburn and Michigan. So Miami has definitely remained in that mix. I think they've done a fair job recruiting him, but I think that this race is really, really tight. And honestly, heading into Saturday, I think that there's going to be a lot of fan bases that are going to be really nervous and really anxious to see how this decision ends up.
All right. Well, 48 hours out, a lot can change. But as it stands right now, what's your prediction on Zaquan Patterson?
Man, it is really, really, really close. But I'm going to have to say Florida State just by a hair. And I mean that in the narrowest of margins. I've got Florida State just squeaking out there.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens. It could be a pivotal week for Miami, right? Steven, if things go right for Miami, and they could, and they land both Stone and Patterson on Saturday, does that change the trajectory of this Miami recruiting class?
Absolutely, it does. I think it does without question. You land a 5-star prospect in David Stone, and then you land a top 100 overall prospect in Zaquan Patterson. I mean, for one, that's going to do a lot for Miami's team recruiting ranking, because right now Miami has 3 top 100 players committed in Josiah Trader, Marquise Lightfoot, and then Kevin Riley, the running back out of Alabama. You're talking about adding 2 more guys into that mix, as well as a 5-star defensive lineman in David Stone. So I definitely think that that's going to have a serious effect on how we look at this class, and I think that it's going to bring a lot of relief to Miami's recruiting room, because of the importance that Miami's placed on defensive line in this class. Now, all of a sudden, you get an absolute game wrecker of a 5-star defensive lineman in David Stone, a guy who you have to think would be a candidate to really play right away, just because he has that kind of skill set at Miami. I think that this really changes the way that this recruiting class would be viewed, just because now you're talking about bringing in 5 guys who could have a potential to really get on the field and make an impact as true freshmen.
Yeah, and like you said, they're guys at positions of need as well. Not only positions of need, but they would be one of the best options at those two spots. So we'll just have to see what happens this weekend. Now, you alluded to it. Miami currently ranked 19th right now, and it's been a relatively quiet summer. Do you think that the Canes can make back that ground in the fall and push for a top 10 class, or even further, maybe even into the top 5 range?
I definitely think so. I think it's possible. Top 10, I think, is obviously easier to get than
Right.
top 5 just because of the obvious. But I think Miami is still going to make some very aggressive recruiting pushes this fall. We just learned the other day that Jeremiah Smith, the number 1 overall prospect in the country, is planning or is hoping to get down to 2 Miami football games this fall. That's a prospect they are still very, very aggressively trying to flip. You have to imagine that they're going to get a lot of very significant talent down for some of these marquee home games that they have against Texas A&M September 9th and then Clemson on October 21st. Both of those are going to be huge games, and I anticipate both of those to be really huge recruiting weekends. And I see all of this kind of advancing what's probably going to be a very late December push, kind of like what we saw last year, where Miami just very aggressively tried to flip a lot of really top prospects. They got Colin Sachiampong to flip from Michigan last year. They really pursued a lot of top talent very aggressively in December. I expect them to do the same this year, and I expect them to try to get as much blue chip talent onto Hard Rock as they can for some of these fall games.
All right. Well, big weekend. Things could look drastically different if 2 recruitments go Miami's way this weekend. Stephen Wagner, thank you for dropping by the Inside Scoop and previewing this weekend's big events.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
This weekend, Florida State will look to add to an already rich DB class. Let's bring on Michael Langston from War Chant. Mike, the number 3 ranked safety in the country. 4-star Zaquan Patterson is set to make his announcement. Miami, Auburn, Michigan, and FSU are the main players. What has FSU done to position themselves as a finalist for Patterson?
I think it's a 2-part thing. One, it's getting him on campus multiple times, but I think the other thing is they've really recruited him personally as a person, and that's really connected with Zaquan and his family. And 2, people that don't know, Zaquan he's kind of a slash linebacker slash safety, but Mike Norvell had a twist to it where he said, I look at you like a playmaker. That's your position. You're a playmaker. So I think that really resonated with Zaquan. And I think as time went on, he saw that stuff. And I think the last thing is Edwin Joseph, Conrad Hussey, both of those are South Florida kids that he's close to. Both of them are making big splashes in the spring and the fall practices. So I think that's also a big thing, that he's seeing his boys play really well, and they're going to be a big part or significant part in this FSU defense. And I think it's kind of fits to Mike Norvell's word that, hey, I'm going to play the best guys. It doesn't matter what year you are. And I think that's really resonated with Zaquan.
Yeah, and I think at different points of his recruitment, different teams have been maybe out ahead as the quote-unquote favorite. At one point it was Miami, at another point it was Auburn and Michigan, and now, as we're about 48 hours out, it really feels like it's trending toward Florida State. So what's your prediction on what Zaquan Patterson could do on Saturday when he announces his decision?
Yeah, my prediction right now would be Florida State. That's where I sit. I felt that way probably for, I would say, a week and a half. Josh, and I haven't heard anything different, except it's been pretty consistent that it's Florida State. And the reason being is just what they've done, what they offer. Certainly it's a position of need of them, getting safeties in this team, because these recruits have seen what they've done with Jamie Robinson and these other players, and they see what FSU's building. And I think the relationships, we talk about that a lot, of why FSU lands a lot of these kids. And I think the relationships at FSU is just the best he has. And that doesn't discount for the other places like Miami and Auburn. And just really shows you, I think, the amount of ground that FSU made up in this recruitment, because they did not have much of a shot early on in this thing where he wasn't even visiting FSU. But I think those last two visits, I think, really resonated and connected with him, and he saw kind of what FSU's doing, and that's why I have the Noles right now.
Yeah, it seems like it's trending that way. And if it continues to through Saturday and Zaquan Patterson does fall to the Seminoles, then, Mike, this has a chance for FSU to land an insane defensive back class, because you already got 5-star safety KJ Bolden, who's the number 1 ranked safety in America, 5-star corner Charles Lesser, the number 2 ranked corner in America. Then you could potentially add Zaquan Patterson, the number 3 ranked safety. Now, FSU does have 3-star safety CJ Hurd committed, but they are not done. What other top DB targets is FSU trying to add to this 2024 class?
Yeah, as you point out, Josh, they are not done. There's a big one still on the table outside of Patterson. He hails also in South Florida, and Jamari Howard out of Miami, Florida. That's a guy that they've had on campus multiple times. He actually shunned Florida to come over for the FSU visit for a 2-day visit, and I think they hold the lead for Jamari. He really connects with Patrick Surtain, and I was kind of joking with people like, I don't know what he's getting paid, but I would be wanting a raise at this point, or a bonus for what the job that Patrick Surtain's already done there. But I think Jamari Howard is kind of the main one that I'm focused on, Josh, right now. There's a few others that they're talking to, but I think for FSU, I think Jamari Howard would be the guy that I think they're focused on, and I think they lead for at this point. He will take a while because he's going to take official visits. He's going to go through the process, but I think they've positioned themselves in that top spot right now for Jamari.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because there were some impatient FSU fans that didn't think Pat Surtain got off to a quick enough start on the recruiting trail. But here we are, and we're not even into the season yet, and it looks like Florida State has a real shot to land one of the top DB classes, if not the top DB class in America. I can't let you go without talking about some Florida State flips, but we're not going to talk about Jeremiah Smith. Everybody talks about Jeremiah Smith. We know that one's going to go down to the wire. He's making a quote-unquote final decision in December. I want to know about some of the under-the-radar ones, mainly Artavius Jones, a 4-star defensive lineman that is committed to Miami, and Jason Zandamela, a 4-star offensive lineman committed to USC. Let's start with Jones. What has FSU done there to put themselves in position for a potential flip?
Yeah, Artavius is, for those that don't know, is from Bluntstown. That's maybe 45 miles away from Tallahassee. It's not far. He went over to FSU late in the summer for kind of a surprise visit, stopping by. He's always liked FSU a lot. He's always had high interest in Odell Higgins. When I checked with my intel, even kind of last week, they indicated they didn't indicate a timeline, but they indicated that this is one that they feel they can get done as far as flipping him from Miami. They feel good about what their product's going to be on the field. Obviously, Miami is the main competitor. So I think if Miami struggles and then you see FSU do what they did last year, I think there's a good chance you could see him in this FSU class. I think that's a guy they feel like things are developing well with what FSU is doing as far as that recruitment and that relationship. So he's one I'm keeping a close eye on. I'm not guaranteeing a flip, but I think right now the confidence from the FSU side is cautiously confident that they can get him.
All right, the other FSU potential flip that I want to talk about is somebody that Florida State thought that they were in good spot with in early summer, and that's Jason Zandamela, the interior offensive lineman out of Clearwater. Then he committed to USC. Is FSU still in touch, and do you expect him back in Tallahassee this fall?
Yeah, Jason Zandamela, I mean, he took a visit in I think March, and you're like, wow, this kid's – I mean, he's like – I asked him directly, Jason, how do you feel? And he's like, who stands out? And he just turned around and looked at Moore Athletic Center and FSU. It was clear that FSU was the school, and then takes an official to USC, and they just offer so many different things, both as a football program and academic institution. I think this really resonated with Jason, and he committed. But FSU's been very active with him. But that's one where I don't think there's a lot of movement that I've seen with FSU. I know he really likes Alex Atkins. There's no secret about that, and who doesn't that he recruits. But I think it's something where, the seasons of USC and the seasons of FSU could dictate kind of where this thing goes if you're going to swing some momentum. Because right now, I think he's very comfortable in that pledge, and I've said that to our our premium recruiting board audience and the War Chant fans that I felt like right now he's still comfortable, although FSU's active. If I was making a pick, I would say that he likely sticks with USC. They already got one flip in Manisi IJT, but I think this one will be a much harder one because of what he sold on with the USC program.
All right, well, we'll watch for those flips down the road, but this weekend, all eyes are on Zaquan Patterson at Chaminade Madonna High School as he makes his college decision. Mike, thanks for dropping by the Inside Scoop and previewing everything that's going on in Florida State recruiting.
My pleasure, Josh.
After stumbling a bit last year, Michigan has been recruiting at an elite level again, but will the Jim Harbaugh suspension controversy set them back on the recruiting trail? Let's bring on Michigan insider EJ Holland of the Wolverine. EJ, we'll talk about Harbaugh's suspension here in a minute, but first, this weekend, four-star safety Zaquan Patterson out of Chaminade Madonna High School down in South Florida, the number 3 ranked DB in the country. He's going to be making his decision. Now, Miami's been trending heavily, but FSU, Michigan, Auburn also involved. What is the latest where Michigan stands as we're just 48 hours out?
I think Michigan's in second place right now. I know there have been some conflicting reports, even within the network. I know you had the Auburn guy on not too long ago, and he said that it seemed more like an Auburn-Michigan race. But I'm hearing a lot about Florida State. They've recently made a big surge. I know talking to those around the Michigan program, Florida State is of the most concern. What Florida State has done recently, obviously they are a team on the rise on the recruiting trail, landing some elite level talent on the back end. And I think they've done a nice job with NIL as well, where Michigan is still figuring out that aspect. And I think those are the two biggest factors counting against Michigan right now is a lack of a plan from an NIL perspective on the recruiting trail as well as distance away from home. Now, Michigan did impress Zaquan Patterson on his 2 unofficial visits this summer. Getting him back-to-back on campus was huge in June and then again in July for the barbecue at the Big House. I think, again, they really impressed him and his mother. The opportunity for early playing time is there. He has a friend in Chris Ewald who's committed to Michigan. So I think that all of that is playing a positive role in regards to Michigan. But right now I would give Florida State the slight advantage heading into the weekend. I think Michigan's going to continue to keep working on this, continue to work hard. I think Auburn's still in the mix there. I think Miami has fallen off a bit, but you can never, completely dismiss Miami based on what they've done on the recruiting trail the last couple of cycles. So that's kind of how I see it right now.
So what's Michigan done to position themselves in, a spot where maybe they can jump up and grab Zaquan on Saturday?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, I think the 2 back-to-back visits in the summer were big. The first one in June was the first time his mother made his way to Ann Arbor. So I think that's when she got a real in-depth look at what Michigan was about from a culture perspective, from an academic perspective, and just how they develop players. And I think that really impressed not just his mom, but obviously Zaquan as well. And like I mentioned, he has a good friend committed in Chris Ewald, a top 100 cornerback in the 2025 cycle. They're teammates at Chaminade Madonna, but they also grew up in the same youth program with DEF CON. They travel around the country, play 7-on-7 together. I feel like that connection is definitely a big help. And Michigan doesn't have a safety committed this cycle. Zaquan's been the guy for the majority of this year and even last year as a junior. So I think all of that is definitely working in Michigan's favor. I'm not counting out Michigan either. I know I may sound pessimistic giving Florida State the edge, but either way, this one's not going to be over. Zaquan's on record saying he's going to make official visits in the fall and he was penciled in to make it to Ann Arbor for the game against Ohio State for his OB. So we'll see if that ends up happening regardless of where he commits this weekend.
All right. Well, EJ, 2 days until the big decision. Give me your final prediction on where Zaquan Patterson goes to school.
I will say it is Florida State this weekend, and we'll see on signing day in December.
Let's switch gears here for a minute and talk a little 2025 QB recruiting, because the dominoes are already starting to fall. Number 1 QB Bryce Underwood out of Belleville, Michigan, is a top target for the Wolverines. But Inside Scoop fans, listen up. I need to tell you about these Bird Dog shorts that I've been wearing. I just got back from vacation down in Florida last weekend, and boy, it was hot. I live in Nashville now, and I've been wearing my Bird Dogs to work for a couple months. Then I started wearing them to golf. I love them because they're way more flexible than my old stiff khakis. And let me tell you, when I was down in Florida, boy, it gets swampy down there. It gets swampy down there, if you know what I mean, but not me, because I brought my Bird Dogs and I had them on the entire trip. Bird Dogs has a great cloud knit fabric that looks just like a nice pair of khakis, but way more flexible. And most importantly, it keeps you cool and dry, even in the Florida swamp. So here's what we're going to do. I need you to go to birddogs.com/Josh or enter promo code Josh for a free Bird Dog tech hat with your order. Got it right here, actually. This Bird Dog tech hat is great. I wear it on the golf course all the time. It looks great, fits great. So go to birddogs.com/Josh or promo code Josh for a Bird Dogs hat. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Okay, EJ, we are back to Bryce Underwood, the number 1 quarterback in the 25 class. Where do the Wolverines stand right now with him?
I think top 2 right now with LSU. I think that was one of the biggest storylines coming out of July. Just a couple of weeks ago, he made, or not a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago now, he made 2 unofficial visits, one to LSU, one to Michigan. So he had a multi-day visit to LSU, spent some time in Baton Rouge around Brian Kelly and that staff, and then immediately flew back home to Michigan and made an unofficial visit for the last day of the barbecue at the Big House, which is Michigan's annual big recruiting event at the end of July. And I think he's developed a really strong relationship with new Michigan quarterbacks coach Kurt Campbell. But as you know, with 5-star quarterbacks or any high-profile quarterbacks, it's going to come down to Jim Harbaugh. I mean, he's the head coach. He's the guy that played quarterback at Michigan. He played quarterback in the league. He's going to have to personally win this recruitment for the Wolverines. I think Jim has done a fantastic job. I think that Bryce Underwood does have a wandering eye to play in the South. He really loves what LSU has done recently. Obviously, they have a lot to pitch as well with the new staff, and just the opportunity to play in the SEC is something that's really appealing to him. I think it's a heated battle right now. He's been to Michigan a bazillion times. You know, he's been to LSU multiple times. I think it's really going to come down to how these 2 teams recruit him in the fall. I'm also interested to see how much NIL becomes a factor. And I know that sounds probably redundant on your show, but when you're talking about the number 1 prospect in the country at the most important position in football, you know NIL is going to creep up at some point. Now, again, as I said earlier in the show, Michigan doesn't have a concrete recruiting plan. I think that's hindered them a bit on the recruiting trail, but they have been able to, you know, win some tough battles this cycle. They obviously have had a ton of success on the field. They have a lot to pitch with Jim Harbaugh's resume as a quarterback guy. So it'll be interesting to see it. And like I said, it's a hometown school. He's been there so much. He's familiar with the program. He knows guys on the team. And Underwood's making a pretty early decision, you know, relative. He's deciding in January. And I think that gives Michigan time to pivot to other options if they miss out on Underwood. And it also allows them to really make Underwood the focus. They're going to keep in contact with other quarterbacks like Hussam Longstreet and Ryan Montgomery. But right now, they're not going to accept the commitment until they know where Bryce Underwood's going. And, you know, luckily for them, he's deciding in January. But I think it's a really tight battle. I mean, I wouldn't really give an edge one way or the other.
All right, EJ. Now, Michigan has other big battles that they've won in the 24 cycle, and they've also lost some. Now, Michigan did get off to a quick start this cycle. They recruited at an elite level for much of the offseason, but something feels a little different now. Recent flip of Elias Rudolph to Miami and potentially losing the Smith twins to Kentucky. Is Michigan losing a little traction heading into the season?
Yeah, they've lost a little bit of steam. When you look at Michigan earlier in the cycle, it looked like they were going to be in contention for a top 3 recruiting class. There was a ton of buzz. I remember I came on the show, I think it was in the spring, Josh, and we were talking about just, trickle down of commits, just sliding into the class. And it seemed like Michigan was back after a really disappointing cycle last year. But recently they've kind of capped out. They had some big misses in the summer with some really important targets. They moved down to number 9 in the On3 industry rankings. I think I checked this morning, and that's exactly where they were. So they've been on a slide. And if you check I always like to use this tool, but if you check the average commit rating, I think Michigan's down at like 17. And they already have 27 commits. So I'm not sure how much more upside there is in the class. There's just limited targets. They're going to have to work to flip some guys, potentially get a guy like Elias Rudolph back in the class. They're going to have to work to keep guys like Gerard Smith and Jacob Smith, who you mentioned, the Smith twins, trending to Kentucky now. So I think it's just been a rough couple of months for Michigan, and it's hard to put a finger on why, other than just using NIL as the excuse, I guess.
Well,
but
what about the news of Jim Harbaugh's suspension? Is that playing into this at all, or is it just kind of the ebbs and flows of recruiting?
I think it's more so the ebbs and flows of recruiting, and like I said, maybe some NIL as well. I think that's the biggest disadvantage for Michigan on the recruiting trail. But in terms of Jim Harbaugh's suspension, I'm not sure that's really playing a role at all. Either way, I mean, when you look at the field, Michigan has a cupcake schedule. I think they can beat the Bowling Greens of the world without Jim Harbaugh. So I don't think it's going to have too much of an effect. Jim Harbaugh has done a fantastic job of selling kids and families on the culture he's built. The evidence is there: back-to-back Big Ten championships, back-to-back wins over Ohio State, back-to-back college football playoff appearances. I mean, his resume as a whole, his NFL experience speaks for itself. And the big thing about Michigan, whenever you read all the reports, or whenever recruits are quoted, it's always family, family, family. That's always the quote when you talk about Michigan. It's not just used as a generic quote at other places. I mean, it's literally a family type of atmosphere. So I think the commits are so close, and they really have bought into that family type of pitch, or not really a pitch, but just the feeling around the program, that I don't think the Jim Harbaugh suspension really matters to most of the guys. Now, like I said, you do have some guys like the Smith twins that are looking around. You had Elias Rudolph decommit, but like you mentioned, it's a recruiting cycle. It's a long game. You might have a short spurt of success here and there, and you think you're at the top, and all of a sudden things can go wrong. But things can also go well in the fall. Michigan has historically never started this fast early on the recruiting trail. They always close strong, and so the opportunity is still there. Even with the limited spots for them to close strong with another successful season. Let's say Michigan lives up to expectations. They win another Big Ten championship. They beat Ohio State at home in the Big House in front of all these recruits. You never know what can happen. So I think right now the Jim Harbaugh suspension is probably, next to last on the list of items that Michigan fans need to worry about from a recruiting perspective.
All right. Yeah, you're right. Hey, they're on a little recruiting slide right now, but probably the best thing for them is for the season to start, because we know they're going to rack up wins. We know they're going to have a chance to win the conference. We know they're going to have a chance to make the college football playoffs again. So we'll see. Michigan has a top 10 class right now, sitting at number 9, like you said. Can they push for a top 5 class once the season begins? EJ Holland, thank you for joining us today on the Inside Scoop. Thank you for watching. Make sure you smash that subscribe button for me, and remember to check out all the videos on the On3 YouTube page.